Welcome back, tech enthusiasts. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most significant legal battles in recent tech history, Google's stunning victory in its appeal against the European Union's €1.49 billion antitrust fine. This case not only highlights the ongoing power struggles between big tech and global regulators, but also sets the stage for future antitrust actions that may shape the digital world as we know it. Let's break it all down. The background. How it all began back in 2019, the European Commission, Europe's top regulatory body, imposed a hefty €1.49 billion fine on Google. The Commission claimed that Google, the world's largest search engine, had engaged in anti-competitive practices in its online advertising business. At the heart of the case was Google's overwhelming dominance in the search engine market, which accounted for a vast majority of search traffic in Europe. According to the Commission, this dominance allowed Google to manipulate the advertising market to its own advantage, severely restricting competition. The fine, one of the largest ever levied in the tech space, was part of a broader EU effort to curb the growing power of Silicon Valley giants who, regulators argue, have been using their monopolistic positions to unfairly dominate a variety of sectors, a decade in the making. Google's online advertising empire. To understand the gravity of this case, we need to go back to the early 2000s when Google was rapidly transforming from a simple search engine into a tech behemoth. At the heart of Google's revenue model is its advertising business, which generates the vast majority of its profits. Google Ads, formerly Google AdWords, revolutionized how businesses approached online advertising, allowing them to target users based on their search queries, location, interests, and other data. By 2019, Google had solidified its dominance not only in search but also in digital advertising, capturing approximately 30% of global digital ad spend. Its closest competitors, like Facebook and Amazon, held significantly smaller shares. The EU's concern wasn't just about Google's success, but how it used that success to restrict competitors, particularly in what's known as search advertising intermediation, the market for placing ads on third-party websites based on user search activity. The EU Commission's case. Accusations of unfair practices. The European Commission's case against Google rested on three major claims. Exploiting market dominance. The primary accusation was that Google had used its dominant position in the search engine market to unfairly favor its own advertising services. The Commission argued that from 2006 to 2016, Google leveraged its market power in search, where it commands over 90% of searches in Europe, to block competition in the online ad space. This market dominance gave Google unprecedented control over ad placement, especially in the lucrative area of search ads on third-party websites. These are ads that appear alongside search results on websites that use Google's search technology but aren't owned by Google. The Commission argued that Google was essentially using its position to make it difficult for other ad intermediaries to compete, giving its own services an unfair leg up. Blocking rival advertisers. One of the core contentions was that Google actively prevented competitors from accessing ad space on these third-party websites. By 2009, Google's AdSense for search had become a dominant force in helping publishers monetize their websites with search ads. According to the EU, Google inserted restrictive clauses in contracts with websites that prevented them from displaying ads from competitors, limiting the options available to both advertisers and website owners. Essentially, this meant that website owners who relied on Google to run search ads couldn't also run ads sold by other ad providers. This practice reduced the visibility and effectiveness of competitors' ads, making it nearly impossible for other ad networks to offer their services. Using exclusivity clauses. The EU's investigation revealed that Google had also included exclusivity clauses in its contracts with publishers. These clauses prohibited third-party websites from running ads from any of Google's rivals. By doing this, the EU argued, Google was not only securing a dominant position in search advertising but actively eliminating competition from other ad services. Over the years, these exclusivity agreements had the effect of reinforcing Google's stranglehold on the digital advertising market, with publishers unable to diversify their revenue streams by partnering with other ad intermediaries. The Commission argued that this created an anti-competitive environment where Google was free to set the terms for the digital advertising ecosystem to its advantage. The European Commission's justifications. consumer harm and market distortion. One of the Commission's primary concerns was that Google's practices were harmful not just to its competitors, but also to consumers. The argument was that, by stifling competition, Google had reduced the quality of the services available to advertisers and publishers. With fewer options available, advertisers were forced to pay higher prices, and publishers had fewer choices in terms of ad revenue opportunities. In the long term, the Commission argued, this lack of competition would likely lead to reduced innovation in the ad space and could even result in higher costs for consumers, as businesses pass along the increased costs of advertising in the form of higher prices. Google's victory. The appeal to the General Court. In a surprising turn of events, the European Union's General Court, the EU's second highest court, annulled the Commission's decision in its entirety. This victory was particularly significant, as the General Court rarely overturns decisions from the European Commission, especially in high-profile antitrust cases. The court's reasoning. A nuanced ruling. Interestingly, the General Court didn't dismiss all of the Commission's arguments. In fact, the court agreed with many of the Commission's findings, particularly regarding Google's dominant market position and the potential for its practices to harm competition. However, the court ultimately decided that the fine imposed by the Commission was not justified and that the EU had failed to sufficiently demonstrate that Google's practices had resulted in significant consumer harm. Insufficient evidence of consumer harm. One of the key reasons for the court's decision was the lack of concrete evidence showing that Google's actions had harmed consumers. While the Commission had made a compelling argument that Google's dominance had stifled competition, the court found that there wasn't enough proof to show that this had led to tangible harm for consumers, such as higher prices or reduced choices. Economic justifications. The court also found that some of Google's practices, while potentially restrictive, could be justified on economic grounds. For example, Google argued that exclusivity clauses were necessary to ensure that it could maintain a high-quality advertising network and offer better services to both advertisers and publishers. The court seemed to accept this argument to some extent, acknowledging that certain restrictions might be necessary for the efficient functioning of a digital advertising network. The scope of the fine. While the court didn't dispute Google's market dominance, it took issue with the size of the fine. The €1.49 billion fine was seen as excessive given the circumstances. The General Court's decision to annul the fine was a blow to the European Commission, which has been aggressively pursuing antitrust cases against tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Apple in recent years. Ongoing scrutiny. The bigger picture for Google. Although this ruling marks a significant win for Google, it doesn't signal the end of its legal troubles. The tech giant continues to face scrutiny from regulators around the world, with antitrust cases cropping up in several major markets. The UK. In the UK, Google is facing ongoing investigations from the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, which has expressed concerns that Google's practices in the ad tech space may be limiting competition and innovation. In particular, the CMA is looking into whether Google's control over the digital advertising supply chain gives it too much influence over how ads are bought and sold. The US. Across the Atlantic, Google's parent company, Alphabet, is facing an even bigger challenge. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google, alleging that it operates an illegal monopoly in the search and advertising markets. The case, which is still ongoing, could have far-reaching consequences not just for Google but for the entire tech industry. Other global markets. Beyond the US and UK, Google is also under scrutiny in India, Australia, and various other markets, where regulators are growing increasingly concerned about the dominance of big tech companies in critical sectors like search, digital advertising, and e-commerce. What this means for the future of big tech regulation. The General Court's ruling in favor of Google is a reminder that antitrust cases, particularly those involving complex digital markets, are never straightforward. While regulators may be eager to rein in the power of tech giants, proving that their practices are harmful to consumers is often a difficult task. Courts, particularly in Europe, are increasingly demanding more concrete evidence of consumer harm before they're willing to uphold large fines. This ruling also underscores the need for regulators to strike a balance between encouraging competition and allowing companies the freedom to innovate. As digital markets continue to evolve, the legal frameworks that govern them will need to adapt, particularly when it comes to regulating new and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and quantum computing. Conclusion. A watershed moment for Google and antitrust law. Google's victory in this case is a major development in the ongoing struggle between big tech